Hey, how you doing, Tom? You all right?
Hi, Kyran, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm not being funny, but you look like you've been in the sun and your hair's gone a bit blonde and you're looking proper cool.
That's not what most people are telling me. I'm getting a lot of other feedback, none of it that positive.
Oh, really? Listen, when you get to my age, look, this is what happens, you see. So anything that looks like yours is an improvement on me. But listen, thanks for coming on to Ruck It. It's great to talk to you, and obviously, everything's out there in the press now about the RFU cutting the funding with the successful Sevens team, which is a bit of a shock to some extent, but also it seems such a shame with the success in the last Olympics, which you were very much part of, and now we've got, well, whenever the Olympics comes around. So I thought I'd just ask you a couple of questions. Nick Easter might join us in a bit. He's coaching at Newcastle. I just want to get your take on it. I mean, it does feels very unfair when you're being so successful. But we're all very hopeful that in the future or very soon that they will be able to carry on. You will be able to compete.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit upon something that you never want to kind of run a sob story as a rugby player. I think we're all very cautious of doing that because, we live a blessed life. We're doing what we love to do for a living, and that's great. But, ultimately as a player, you play, and if you're successful and you win games, then you expect that the rest kind of follows. And we've kind of tried to point out that as a Sevens team, both as the Great Britain team in Rio before, but also as an England squad, we've made all major tournaments in the last period of time, basically at Commonwealths, at the World Cup, the Olympic Games, obviously, as Great Britain. So it doesn't really feel like this is just, to use your words, that's certainly the feeling that we're getting. And it's tough, because it's not, I think as Sevens players as well, they're very aware that you can't go and play for another Sevens club. We do what we do because we get to play for our country, and we're very proud of doing that. But it does mean you're tied to it. You're bound by that choice. And now that that's kind of been taken away, and obviously a lot of it's out of certain people's hands, but it's certainly the way we've ended up as players feels pretty unfortunate.
It just seems, I mean, obviously there's not, you look at the RFU and you look at, they're probably one of the richest unions in the world. And actually you look at New Zealand, who actually use the Sevens pathway as a means to sort of bedding these young players in who then go on to be great All Blacks players. I mean, I remember Jonah Lomu playing at one stage in Sevens, and this is way back before your time. But a lot of these players came through that, and it just seems such a shame, such a waste that they've done that. I mean, there's the argument as well, that they've cut the funding with the championship players as well, which does seem very unfair, especially in the World Cup. They had quite a number of players who came from the championship. But that aside, is there a possibility that Team G, or that there be some other a way of actually keeping these great players together to try and medal? Because obviously we want medals in the Olympics like every nation does want them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, particularly for those of us who were involved in Rio, we know what a big occasion the Olympics is, not just to deliver medals and to go and get a gold medal in Tokyo, but what a massive occasion that is to inspire the future generations. And, the Olympics takes rugby to a totally different audience. It's brilliant for people who are really involved in the game, but it also just reaches even further than we could hope to without that Olympic opportunity and that stage. So we recognise the value in that, and I think as a result, as a player group, we're still massively driven to try and make it happen. We've tried to kind of stay pretty tight as a group because you know what it's like when you're a rugby player. A lot of what your life revolves around, being part of that group. Your identity's linked into it, and all of a sudden, a big part of that's been stripped away. So we've tried to stay tight and are still working both individually, but also trying to coordinate something as a group so that come next year, we'll be in a good place to contend for that gold medal in Tokyo. And it's not going to be easy, I don't think. I think, negotiating, training schedules and stuff on an individual basis has been really tricky for the last few months. And But also now we're trying to negotiate the businessy commercial side of things, which, being totally open and honest, we don't know a huge amount about because we're busy been trying to be the best rugby players we can be for the last however many years. So there's a bit of new ground that we're exploring, but we're trying to stay positive that if we can put a few things in order and get a few things in line, then we'll be in a good place, because we've got the players, and that's always the hardest thing.
I guess then the plan, I suppose, from the RFU's point of view, in a way, is to sort of let all you guys muddle through, try and get jobs. I've noticed that quite a few of the teams are now picking up quite a lot of you. Just give me an insight to yourself. So what do you plan to do? Because, you seem right for being picked up by these Premiership clubs to sort of play and then maybe get released for for the Sevens.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, quite a couple of guys have been picked up, but it doesn't seem like an easy landscape at the moment. Obviously, as you said, you've got a lot of Championship guys as well who are looking for contracts. Clubs have got their own financial difficulties, and they've got, a lot of them haven't had any rugby, so they've got full squads at the moment, and they're not looking to supplement them. So it's not been an easy landscape for the Sevens guys to break into, particularly those who have committed to the Sevens for a long time. I guess it's probably maybe the views of Sevens players in this country aren't quite as favourable, or it's not perhaps recognised for its strengths as it is in New Zealand, South Africa, some of the other countries that play at the top level. So yeah, it's been tricky, but I mean, it's great to see some of the guys slotting in. I mean, Norts has got a short-term deal at London Irish. We've got a couple of our young lads, Benny Harris at Surrey's, Will Muir at Bath, which has just been announced. Tom Emery, young lads will be playing the Champ whenever that starts up again for Coventry. Who am I missing?
Well, Rory McConaughey, he's been a bit of a success story, I suppose, who went into 15s. I'm just interested to get your take on, why is it, I see you guys out on the Sevens pitch and I look at you guys, it all really about what you can do with the skills, especially the speed. And then I always wonder to myself, like, to some extent, why doesn't it translate into the 15 games? And I read a report which was quite interesting. You wouldn't buy a Ferrari if you were going to drive it in sort of in the busiest time of the day, if you know what I mean. And it's a bit like that in relation to Sevens and 15s. Is like you got these guys who are really fast and some great skills, but actually, when the time is taken away from them on a 15-a-side rugby pitch, it's that much more difficult. I don't know, what's your take on it, on the transition from Sevens to 15s?
Yeah, I mean, I think your assessment of it highlights that there is obviously a degree of adaptation that would need to take place to shift over. But I think because in Sevens you're forced to develop your skill set to an extent that it puts you in a good place to shift over. So, for example, like, your one-on-one abilities, both defense and attack, you have to be top notch in Sevens. And I think as well, the way the 15s game is changing is hugely dynamic now. It's kind of power moment after power moment. It's not really that kind of rush hour traffic type game that analogy suggests. So that crossover is kind of maybe getting easier from Sevens to 15s, but also I think it's evidenced by some guys who have done it. Rory being a great example, who kind of swooped in and then ended up in the World Cup squad, much to our delight. We all enjoyed seeing that, as well as giving him some abuse as well. But then you've got like Cheslin Colby, who's a Sevens guy, who's absolutely torn up, and he's a small guy with great feet, and maybe the best step. So he's maybe the best example of that type of player, but it shows that it can be done, and not just get by, but really set the game alight. And I don't know. I think part of it, if I'm honest, and I'm coming from someone who hasn't really experienced the professional 15s game in this country, so I understand that I've got a bias on this, but I think there's it's a perception thing more than anything, because in other countries we've seen that the Sevens guys are easily adopted into the 15 sides, as and when. South Africa and New Zealand, as I mentioned, being the prime examples of those. So I think it's a perception thing. It's a bit of a traditional view of things. And I think it will change eventually. But it's just, a case of probably getting a few prize horses like Rory McConaughey. I can't believe I've just called him that. But, getting a few guys to have some success like he has.
But I suppose you started out in 15, so I'm guessing. What position were you then? What was your prime position in 15?
Well, growing up, I played a lot of 9 and 10, and then at Bristol Uni, great place. I played in the centres mostly and a bit of fullback as well. So kind of dotted around the back line a bit, but was kind of outside backs, 13, 15 towards the end, and then before I ended up going into full-time sevens.
Well, I think all the general rugby public are desperate to see you guys carry on, and I really do hope that the fact that these players are now, signing professional contracts. Do you know if they've signed professional contracts with an eye to allowing them to be released for the Olympics potentially, or is that very much dependent on how they're doing? Have you got insight into their contracts as yet? Are you hoping that they'll get released?
Yeah. I don't know the ins and outs of everyone. Everyone's sort of gone and got their own arrangements, obviously. But I know that all the guys that were involved in the sevens program up to this point, their dream is to go and play in the Olympics. Yes, they might have, aspirations to do things in 15s going forward, but that opportunity to go to an Olympic Games doesn't come along very often. It's a very special one. And I know that guys had worked really hard towards that goal. And I'm pretty sure that most of them, if not all of them, will want the chance to satisfy that goal. And hopefully their experience in 15s will help with that. And hopefully also they offer something to the Premiership as well.
Because one thing that could happen, and I think everyone wants to see Team GB do really well in the Olympics, but maybe all of the clubs, they will have quite a few surplus players who aren't playing regularly 15s, who are young up and coming players. And wouldn't it be great to get a pool of all of these young guys who might be available to play that sevens and to be available for selection, or even some of the the Anthony Watsons and those sort of players to be released to go out and play? I guess it might collide a bit with the Lions. I don't know whether that's going to go ahead, but it would be great. I just want to ask you though about what's it like to, look, we look at the Olympics in all, really, us sportsmen. We live in a real bubble in the rugby world. You play for your club, then you play for your country, different experience, and then you travel, you go to a World Cup. But a lot of us would be very intrigued as to what it's like in the Olympic Village, what it's like to be representing Team GB. For you, any insights of what that's like?
Well, representing Team GB feels like it's a massive deal. I've always loved representing England because you get to connect with everyone who associates themselves with that. And being part of Team GB just kind of took that feeling to the next level, just because it felt so big, not only in terms of the number of athletes involved, but obviously the number of people who are invested in that. Because you pick up on the support beyond your own sport. So just because you're wearing the GB flag, then getting the support for people who are into hockey or judo, whatever it is. And that was awesome feeling, and that came with a lot of pride. And then the village was just a very surreal experience. Like we always compared it to like Jurassic Park sort of thing, because you literally, when you're walking around, it's like you're just like looking at all these different athletes. You've got like a complete spectrum of humanity out there, not only in terms of nationalities and types of people, but physically as well. You've got like tiny gymnasts, sitting at one table all together with their hair all pristine, a bit like mine actually, hair all straight back, the makeup on, and then you've got another table, with like volleyball players or basketball players or discus throwers, and they're just like huge human beings. So you've got the full spectrum, and then you've got Usain Bolt wandering around with his literally 20 or 30 people chasing him for a picture. So I think he only stayed in the village for a couple of days because it was just a nightmare for him. But also, I think just as like sports fans growing up, loving the Olympics, you get the chance to kind of get in a dinner queue with like Andy Murray, and Mo Farah was behind me queuing up to like fill up his water bottle from the thing. And you're just like, this is nuts.
What about the drinking? Did you guys lead the way a little bit?
Oh, it was ridiculous. It was terrible. Really? Well, it was great, but we were quite early on in the in the schedule of events. So there's a responsibility to kind of keep it together to some extent if you're in the village, because you don't want to damage anyone else's chances of competing the next day, whatever. We the night of the medal ceremony, we obviously went out for some drinks, like part of the course. And then we had, because of the time difference, we had media duties the following morning at 7 a.m. And actually, Rory speaks about this because he delivered the worst, but subsequently most in kind of entertaining interview I've ever seen. And it's still floating around somewhere on the internet. In fact, we spoke to him because I'll give my own podcast a plug. Yeah, a little bit. So we talked about it on Seventh Heaven, which is the podcast that I do with a couple of guys. And he's shared it. So I think it's all right for me to say it again, that if you Google it, it's out there somewhere. It's gold. He has no idea what he's saying. But I also had to be excused from an interview that morning because I was a little bit worse for wear. But it's to be expected. I mean, we just got a silver medal. What are you going to expect from the lads the next morning?
That was amazing. I think you kicked the goal though, didn't you, against the South Africans, if I'm right, if I remember. Everyone was going mental, absolutely mental.
It was crazy. I mean, we didn't exactly have a very smooth route to the final. Like, it was, all the games were so close, within 2 points. I mean, it was a brilliant experience, and it was great for the game as well, because it properly highlighted what a great game it is for people to watch, even people who aren't, super into it. And we were in Brazil, like, it's not a rugby crowd out there, but everyone was absolutely loving it and really getting involved. So, hopefully that was, it definitely felt like the springboard for the game. Obviously now things feel like they're stagnating a bit. But, this is a time for change, and hopefully Sevens will be better for it when it comes back.
Absolutely. Just tell me what you're up to. I know you went to a second-rate university after Bristol. You went to Oxford, didn't you? I'm only joking. But so what was that like? You played in the varsity, and I think you won in your varsity match. So what are you doing with your studies, and what was that experience like?
It was cool. I mean, the first example of kind of rugby offering opportunities other than the enjoyment of playing the game. So the varsity at Oxford was a bit different to the Bristol University when we used to play UE down. Which was good fun, but probably a bit more raucous, actually, the Bristol varsity. But yeah, I mean, that was a brilliant experience at Oxford, and I was very fortunate to do that. And it was my first proper experience of playing at Twickenham as well, which, is a very special occasion whenever you get to do that as a rugby player. And I met a lot of amazing people there as well. So that was brilliant. And all those studies have proved absolutely useless so up to this point, because I haven't put them to good use at all.
What did you study? What did you study?
At Bristol, and then I did historical studies at Oxford.
Wow.
Incidentally, the course I did at Oxford no longer makes you eligible for the varsity match. So you can read into that what you will. But it was good fun. I really good experience.
You got in time anyway.
Exactly, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, listen, you've been very kind with your time, and listen, if I had a chance to have, you've got the sort of like, what can I say, the surfer curls at the back, which are all really blonde. Just turn to the side so I can have a look. Look at that. Oh my God, that is proper. So listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. All I can say is I wish you luck in your dream of your Sevens guys coming back together and getting to the Olympics and winning another medal for us. We appreciate everything you've done in the game, and let's keep everything's crossed that your CV is out there, that you can get a job out there playing 15s rugby somewhere, and then winning a medal for us again. All right. So
cheers, Kyran. Appreciate it.
And I'll look out for your podcast, Seventh Heaven. I look forward to listening to that, and take care, my man. Cheers.
Nice one. Cheers, Kyran. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.